Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Metabolic Alchemist. I'm Kylie Gallagher. I'm your naturopath, your nutritionist, and your, fitness guru, probably. Anyway, I want to open up today's episode with a statistic that literally really stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. I had to actually just double check that dementia is actually the number one killer for Australian women. No, not breast cancer, not heart attacks, but dementia. And it's been the leading cause of death for women since 2016. That's right. Right now, there are 266,000 Australian women living with dementia. And without a significant medical breakthrough, the number is projected to top over 500,000 by 2065. That is more than double. And more than 70% of those dementia cases actually have Alzheimer's. So the number one thing killing Australian women is brain disease. And most women in their 40s and 50s are completely unaware that this window to do something is upon us now. Not when you're 70 and all those symptoms are appearing. No, it's now. This is why we're having this conversation today. And this will completely reframe everything for you. Most people think Alzheimer's is genetic, something you get or get passed down to, like a ticking time bomb in your DNA that you just happen to have the luxury of waiting to happen. No, the research actually completely tells a different story. Less than 1% of Alzheimer's cases are caused by these genes passed down. The rest are largely lifestyle. And that means, guess what? It's all in your control. Up to 45% of dementia cases could potentially be delayed or mitigated completely. And that's not a small number. That's a pretty large number. So in this episode, it's not doom and gloom. No, this is an empowering episode, ladies, because you are here right now in the prime window to protect your brain. All right, guys, let's get into it before either of us forget why we're actually here. Okay, let me start with something most women don't realize about the brain. The brain changes in perimenopause are not vague or anecdotal. They are actually neurological, and they are actually very measurable, and they begin years, sometimes a decade before your last period says goodbye. And here's why. Estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. Ta-da! Your brain is actually heavily loaded with estrogen receptors. Estrogen helps you maintain the integrity of your blood-brain barrier. Get that out. That's the lining that keeps your brain being protected from all the toxins that are floating around in your bloodstream from all the food that gets sprayed and the chemtrails in the sky. Okay, so it regulates neurotransmitter activity also. They're pretty important too. And estrogen also helps reduce inflammation in the brain. Critically, it suppresses the formation of amyloid plaques, and those are the sticky protein things that are mostly attributed to Alzheimer's. So when estrogen starts declining in perimenopause and all protective function starts to waver, your brain essentially starts to lose that very capable personal bodyguard that you've been carrying around in your 20s and 30s. But here's even more interesting fact, and this is emerging research, and I find it really, really fascinating. If you can get your brain wrapped around it. Your brain actually shifts fuel source during this transition. Now, what does that mean? Normally, the brain runs on glucose derived from the bloodstream. And as estrogen drops, the brain becomes less efficient at metabolizing that glucose, and it starts to really struggle to convert it into energy. So it tries to shift towards fat, specifically ketones, as this energy fuel source. So if you're not fat adapted, if you've been spending years on a low-fat diet, eating processed carbohydrates and seed oils, your brain is literally caught in an energy crisis. It can't access that glucose efficiently anymore, and it doesn't have the fat there to back it up as a metabolic infrastructure. So think of it like this. Your brain is like a car that's been running on petrol all its life. Now that petrol supply is getting unreliable and it needs to switch to another fuel source. But if you haven't built the engine around that new fuel source, the whole system isn't set up for it, and you're going to splutter to a stop. A little bit like our brain can splutter every time we walk into a room and wonder what we're doing there. This is why I talk about the Goldilocks zone. And this is the 60 to 80 grams of quality carbohydrates that is the target zone for our body to work on, not from just a metabolic point of view for weight loss, but it's also our protective brain strategy. So I designed my whole diet and nutrition philosophy around a book I read over 10 years ago from Dr. David Perlmutter called The Grain Brain. And everything that's come out in that research since has only strengthened the framework that I teach. Now, before I move on, I want to address something because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but Carly, I've had my gallbladder out and high fat doesn't work for me anymore. I've been told to stop eating fat my whole life since the surgery. And honestly, I want to flip that table over for you because that advice to eat low fat forever after your gallbladder is removed is one of the most well-meaning but potentially brain-damaging pieces of dietary advice being handed out by your medical team. And here's the truth. Your liver still produces bile after your gallbladder has been removed. The gallbladder was never making the bile. It was just simply storing it and then concentrating it and then releasing it in this really nice, well-timed surge whenever you consumed fat in your diet. And without that storage system now, the bile just drips and drains just, whenever the liver, decides to get rid of it. And it's kind of more diluted, but it's there, So when fat arrives, there isn't huge amounts of concentrated bile to help you break that down, but there is a little bit. So this means that absorption really is impaired. It's not impossible, but it is significantly impaired. And fat absorption is the entire foundation for your brain health. So that whole DHA, the omega-3 that makes up 40% of your brain's fatty acid, requires bile to get it absorbed. So does vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, vitamin A. They all are fat soluble and all require bile for their absorption and all critical neurological function and also reducing neuroinflammation. So when you're told to not eat fat and stick to a low-fat diet for the rest of your life, in doing so, you're literally starving your brains of the raw materials that most people actually need. So the answer is not to avoid fat. The answer is to support your digestion so you can actually absorb the fats. You can use ox bile, digestive enzymes with lipase. They're all great to take with a fatty meal or with a meal that will help you absorb the beneficial fats from that meal. And the beautiful exception to that whole thing is that coconut oil or MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides, they're absorbed directly through the small intestine. You don't even need bile to break that down. So just whack some MCT oil in your coffee in the morning or throw it on a salad or put it in a smoothie. That's why it's there as brain fuel. So let's get used to it. And, you don't need a gallbladder to do that. All right, let's get into one of my favorite pastimes, sleep. I don't want to talk to you about sleep, not in the fluffy prioritize your sleep way. It is in this literally how your brain cleans itself way. Scientists discovered that our brains have its own waste removal system. It's called the glymphatic system. And think of it like a dishwasher for your brain. While you're sleeping, specifically in a deep sleep, your fluid flushes through your brain tissue, washing out all of the metabolic waste. And that includes the amyloid beta proteins, the ones that are attributed to Alzheimer's. So we want to flush the brain out. The system is almost exclusively active during sleep, though. So it's barely running during the day and it barely runs during light or broken sleep either. It's like I talk about how sleep is important for fat loss. Go back to that episode, maybe 2 or 3 on sleep. But also, you're missing out on your dishwasher function. Year after year, your brain's dishwasher never gets to finish its cycle. I don't want to be cleaning up that trap in your dishwasher. It's just getting dirty and sticky and gross. Hello, Alzheimer's. Now we know why. And perimenopausal women who are losing deep sleep, this is a direct pathway to accelerated neurological decline. Protecting deep sleep is one of the highest leveraged things you can do for your brain, and it's free. You could just go to bed. Now, if you're having shitty night's sleep, go and listen to my sleep podcast. I'll link that podcast in my show notes below. So let's get back to the statistics because I want to make sure that this really lands. Right now in Australia, dementia is killing more women than any other disease. More than breast cancer, more than heart disease, and the majority of the people are women. This is not primarily because women live longer, though that's kind of part of it. It's biology. Estrogen normally suppresses this amyloid plaque formation and the tau tangles. And those are the 2 hallmarks for Alzheimer's. And when it drops our estrogen, then the suppression gets lifted. And there is something called a critical window hypothesis. The idea that perimenopause is potentially your most important window for brain protection is mind-blowing. What we do now categorically sets you up for success later in life. That means saving brain function. While estrogen is now still fluctuating in those perimenopausal blood veins of yours, your brain's estrogen receptors are still very responsive. But once you are postmenopausal and for long enough, those receptors, well, they downregulate, they switch off. So if they're not listening, then that window closes. So now research is now linking earlier menopause, the women who have to maybe surgically go through menopause early, they have a shorter lifetime of that estrogen receptor exposure. And so they have a higher risk burden to the brain. And so there's that metabolic connection that David Perlmutter has been talking about for years. And the science is now just catching up. Some researchers now call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. The insulin resistance in the brain protects neurons from glucose for energy. Diabetics, well, they're 2 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's within 15 years of diagnosis because those neurons, they can't get the fuel. They starve, they malfunction, they die. And this is why fat-based fuel models matter so much more. The ketones, they're produced when you become fat adapted, when you use MCT oil, which is in my programs, when you exercise fasted, again in my programs, when you eat in the Goldilocks zone, not eating too much carbohydrates or sugars or processed sugars, we can bypass that whole insulin resistance entirely and feed neurons directly. And remember, less than 1% of Alzheimer's cases are determined by their gene type. So up to 45% of that whole risk is modifiable. The choices you make in your 40s are building you up for protection of your brain in your 70s. You're not powerless. You are actually incredibly powerful right now if you're in your 40s or listening to this. So before I get into what we can actually do to help with our brain function, I need to introduce you to a protein I'm going to mention several times later in this episode. It's called a BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So this BDNF is kind of like Miracle Grow for your brain. If your brain is like a garden, BDNF is what makes things grow. More neurons, new connections, new pathways. This is what neuroplasticity is actually formed from, your brain's ability to change, adapt, and repair itself. BDNF is the foreman running the whole operation. The hippocampus, that's the part of the brain associated more with memory and learning. And the most vulnerable part to Alzheimer's is one of the most BDNF dependent regions in your brain. So let's get down to the problem. Chronic stress, well, it's going to deplete your BDNF. Poor sleep depletes BDNF. Overconsumption of sugars, processed foods, alcohol depletes BDNF. You know where I'm going. Chronic inflammation also depletes it, and sedentary lifestyles also deplete BDNF. So basically, everything in perimenopausal life is basically depleting your brain's miracle grow. Excellent. This is great. So the good news is certainly things can drastically improve and raise your BDNF, like exercise, particularly high intensity exercise, certain foods, certain supplements, breath work. And this is why the protocol that I teach is not just about losing weight. I'm going to take you through this very powerful element stack. And on top of it all is exercise. So I know that a lot of women come into my programs loving walking, 10,000 steps. And look, it is wonderful. It's wonderful for blood sugar regulation. It's lovely to de-stress. It's a great way to catch up with your girlfriend, to exercise the dog. It has some great mental health benefits. It's great for getting away from your family for 45 minutes. I will never tell you not to walk to get away from your family. But if you want to protect your hippocampus, your memory center, the research is very, very clear. Walking is not enough. And there is this landmark study in 2024 that was published in the Journal of Aging and Disease. And they tested 151 healthy adults between 65 and 86 over this 6-month program. They had 3 groups: a low intensity stretching kind of group, a moderate intensity treadmill walking group. Sounds boring, that one. And then there was a HIIT group. And the HIIT group, they did 4 cycles of intensity workouts at 80 to 90% of their maximum heart rate. And they did this over 3 days of the week. And after 6 months, the low, moderate intensity groups, they stayed maintaining their current cognitive function, right? Which is good. They didn't necessarily go backwards. But don't get me wrong, the only people that showed actual improvement in their hippocampal function was the ones that were doing the HIIT class. And when they researched all of those HIIT people years afterwards, they had retained their cognitive benefits and improved upon them by keeping up with their HIIT style exercises. And then there was a separate 2025 meta-analysis in the Frontiers of Physiology, and they were reviewing 18 studies that found HIIT significantly outperformed moderate intensity, long duration exercises over their cognitive flexibility, working memory, their task switching, attention control. And why? Because HIIT is the most powerful known stimulator of BDNF, that miracle grow juice for the brain. The intensity is the key signal. Your brain responds to the challenge. It responds to the demand of your body. It's essentially saying, oh, great. Oh, well, we're doing this now. Okay, let's get to it. Let's fine. I'd better grow some new connections pretty smartly and efficiently and get myself organized. So that gentle stroll with the dog, that doesn't kind of create the same signal. Your brain just enjoys the view and or whatever park that you're walking in. Now, I want to be very clear because I know my audience are like, I'm going to go and smash this now, I'm going to go and grind a HIIT class every day. But go back to my previous podcast around the cortisol conspiracy and the stress bucket theory, because no, Going and grinding yourself in HIIT every day, that is not going to work either, especially for weight loss. For perimenopausal women with elevated cortisol, adrenal fatigue, or thyroid dysfunction, a daily smashing it out HIIT class is not appropriate. It's going to backfire significantly. 3 well-designed metabolic exercises, 15 minutes, high intensity. They're designed to burn fat, but also, surprise, surprise, grow your miracle grow solution juice, BDNF, get my brain saturated. And it's where the research shows us the best sweet spot. So this is exactly what we built in the app for women, and doing it fasted in the morning once you've released some ketones before you eat compounds that brain benefit, because fasted exercise accelerates ketone production, which fuels the brain, and you're getting 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, I want to talk about creatine because I always get asked about creatine. And I want to do this very carefully because I think it's one of the most exciting and interesting supplements in the context of women's brain health. Now, most people hear creatine and immediately envisage a man in a gym with a neon shaker cup drinking from a shaker bottle. And this is not what we're talking about today. Emerging research is showing that creatine is a critical brain energy compound, shuttling fuel from your mitochondria directly into your brain cells. And women in perimenopause, particularly those with declining cognitive function and lowering estrogen levels, may have significantly lower than they realize. In a 2024 study, they reviewed creatine supplementation and showed that it had a positive effect on memory and information processing speed. And the benefits were more pronounced in females than in men. That's really surprising, right? There's even a 2025 Alzheimer's pilot right now trialing the measurable improvements of cognitive function after 8-week supplementation of creatine. But here's my honest clinical position. I always go back to food first. Always. Firstly, you've got to eat. So if you're going to spend any money, you're going to buy food over supplementations. Also, if you're following a high protein, high fat, moderate carbohydrate diet, which is exactly what I teach in my programs, it's going to be heavily focused around red meat, fish, eggs. And guess what? You're going to be getting all of the beneficial dietary creatine from those protein sources. Your body will also synthesize its own creatine. So for many women who are eating well, you might not even need supplementation. Your steak is probably doing the job just fine. Now, the women I'm mostly concerned about are the women who are plant-based, particularly those who are under eating proteins or postmenopausal or in severe estrogen decline, whether that's medical induced or not. So a word of caution. If you already have kidney issues, please don't jump onto creatine. You need to work with a practitioner. I had a patient develop kidney stones from taking creatine. And it wasn't even excessive amounts of creatine. It was just, I was taking it because I heard it was good. And that's the point. For some people, their biochemistry, their hydration habits, their predisposition to stone formation means creatine supplementation isn't really appropriate, regardless of the dose. And this is not a supplement you just want to chuck in your trolley because you saw it on my podcast. I'm looking at you guys who are like writing down all the supplements now. Get your diet right first. Get your digestion working, especially if you haven't got a gallbladder. You build the foundation with the right fuel sources. You support digestion with the right digestive enzymes and nutrients to build that. And then you consider taking targeted supplementation when it makes sense for your specific need. If you're already showing signs of cognitive decline, brain fog that's not shifting, memory lapses, losing your mind mid-sentence, and standing in front of the fridge thinking, what did I open the fridge for? Then there are specific nutrients that I'm going to talk about that I've got really strong evidence and that I would absolutely use in a foundational protocol in my clinic if it was needed. So these are the ones, DHA and EPA. So these are your omega-3s. They're the structural fats your brain basically is made of. So that's a non-negotiable. If you eat lots of fish in your diet and get lots of omegas, then you probably don't need to supplement more. Magnesium 3 and 8. This is the only form of magnesium that crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it's not just any magnesium, but that will support memory and sleep, and it helps with that dishwasher action, like the glymphatic clean out overnight. B vitamins, particularly B12 and folate, essential for neurotransmitters, reducing homocysteine, directly linked to Alzheimer's. So if you're on a protein pump inhibitor, so go back and listen to my Heartman podcast. I'll put the link below. Nexium, Somac, they're basically turning off your digestion. You're going to be mostly deficient in a lot of these nutrients. So B12, full stop, you need to get that in. Your vitamin D, directly linked to neuroinflammation and cognitive decline. Now, choline. This is the precursor to acetylcholine, and that's a memory neurotransmitter, and that's usually attributed to Alzheimer's for sure. Choline, get from eggs. Hello, coming back to our food. I love a herb called Brahmi. Brahmi's really great for memory, focus, nervous system. There's also ginseng, a great one, although there is a little bit of a worry that we're using too much ginseng in the world, but certainly an ancient herb, Chinese herb, that's amazing for memory. MCT oil, I'll say it again, medium chain triglycerides, immediate ketone fuel for the brain, perfect for bypassing insulin resistance. Curcumin, so that's turmeric. Curcumin's active ingredient, crosses the blood-brain barrier as well. One of the most researched anti-neuroinflammatory compounds available. Your turmeric latte is not going to cut the mustard though. So go and get your bioavailable curcumin format for sure. There's something called lion's mane mushroom. Now, this stimulates nerve growth factor, supporting the growth of new neural connections. Sounds like something from a fantasy novel, I know, but the research is very, very real. So go and find some lion's mane mushrooms. And of course, creatine monohydrate, which I've talked about, make sure it's for the right reasons, as we've discussed. And each of these, works through very different mechanism. The right combination, well, that really depends on the individual entirely. Your diet, your digestion, your hormone status, your symptoms. This is why detective work should be done. Working with a naturopath or nutritionist is absolutely important when you're putting the right protocol together in the first place. Now, you know me, I love everything yogi. And so there's 2 practices. They're free, maximum 15 minutes. You can do them on your back. Excellent. No equipment is even needed. No gym membership, no neon shaker bottle. Legs up the wall, Viprata Karani. So you literally just put your legs up the wall. That's it. That's the entire practice, guys. So all you need to do is locate a wall, lie down, and you've got this. You've mastered it. You're a pro. It supports cerebrospinal fluid flow, lymphatic drainage, and activates your parasympathetic nervous system. When your cortisol drops, your nervous system will downregulate, and critically, you're priming your brain for deep sleep. And this is perfect to do before bed. Think of it as a primer for your glymphatic dishwasher process overnight. Genuinely, one of the best bang for buck tools around. And there's another one that you can add. either when you're on your back or at another time of the day, and that's called Nadi Shodhana. I'll put the link into Nadi Shodhana in my show notes as well. This is on my YouTube channel, Alternative Nostril Breathing. So this deliberate breath work stimulates something called the vagus nerve, and this through the diaphragm has a measurable impact on inflammation, memory, and cognitive function. And there even is some research in 2025. This research described pranayama producing brain effects parallel to any other neuromodulation strategies. And guess what? It's completely self-directed and free. So jump on, get my demonstration on my YouTube channel, just 5 minutes. Put your legs up the wall, get some breath work in, and you'll find it's completely powerful and accessible brain health tool for no cost. So let me bring all this home. Dementia is the number one killer of Australian women, and that is super, super sad. It's been number one since 2016. But a majority of those cases are actually Alzheimer's, and less than 1% is purely genetic, which means that the rest, the vast majority, is actually influenced by what we do here and now. And the choices that we make in our 40s and 50s is actually the critical window for mitigating Alzheimer's and dementia. The perimenopausal brain is not broken. It's not abandoned you, even if you forget where you put your phone. It is responding to a profound hormonal shift that exposes all of these gaps in your fuel metabolism, your nutrient status, your sleep quality, and your inflammation load. And those gaps are absolutely addressable, like I said. Your protocol, ladies, become fat adapted through your nutrition. Your brain needs your fat as fuel, especially now. And if you've had your gallbladder out, that means supporting your digestion so you can actually help digest the fats. Don't avoid it. High intensity metabolic workouts 3 times a week with a rest day in between. This drives your BDNF and protects your hippocampus. Your brain needs to be challenged. So 80 to 90% heart rate up. This is not a stroll in the park. This is getting your heart rate up, getting the high intensity up. Food. This is your first option always before supplementation. Quality animal proteins, healthy fats are going to be more important than supplementation unless you need it. So for those who absolutely need supplementation, who have the right clinical picture for it, not just what they read on Instagram at midnight, you definitely can use those nutritional supplements that I mentioned before. Don't forget protected deep sleep. Your glymphatic system, your dishwasher needs to activate at nighttime. So go and listen to my podcast on sleep. Get to bed early so you can activate your deep sleep and flush that brain out. Legs up the wall. Nadi Shodhana before bed. Perfect. 15 minutes, free, research-based, and it's going to work. This is not overwhelming when you build this systematically. And this is exactly what I do inside Inner Alchemy, in my ecosystem, in my app. We have the exercises, we've got the yoga, the breath work, we have the food, the macros are all balanced and done for you. Our philosophy is designed around feeding the brain. And guess what? You just so happen to lose weight at the same time. So if this episode resonates with you, please share it with one of your friends or anybody in their 40s and 50s who are the prime candidates to stopping our number one killer of women in Australia. This is important, not just for our lives, our children's lives, their children's lives. Let's change that. The earlier we get in, the better. So all my research, all my links are all listed below in the show notes. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep alchemizing. All right, ladies, I'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap. Phew. If something clicked for you today, I've got all the links to my favourite products, supplements, and exactly where to buy them waiting for you in the show notes. No hunting required. Want more personalised support? I totally get it. This journey can be overwhelming when you're doing it all on your own. Whether you're ready to jump into my one-on-one coaching programs or test it out first in my online metabolic flash course, I've got your back. Just head to the show notes for the links to those pages or my website inner-alchemy.com.au and let's turn those frustrating symptoms into your comeback story. Because honestly, the best version of you isn't in your past. She's waiting on the other side of these new rules. Until next time, remember, work smarter, not harder. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you in the next episode.